Welcome to Mama Needs a Moment. And we are here with some of our HER Expert providers. We'd like to give them a nice warm welcome and thank you for joining us today. We are recording our roundtable discussion on household systems that actually reduce stress. When most moms think about reducing stress, they often focus on doing more. I have to do this. I have to figure this out. They try to get more organized or somehow becoming better at juggling it all. But what if the answer isn't doing more at all? What if it's creating systems that help your household run more smoothly so you're not carrying everything alone? Today, we're exploring practical ways to reduce the mental load through routines, communication, delegation, sensory-friendly environments, and family systems that support everyone in the home. We'll discuss how small shifts can create meaningful change and help families move from simply surviving to truly thriving. Before we dive into our discussion, we'll have each expert introduce themselves and share a bit about their areas of expertise. And please don't forget, if you'd like to watch this conversation and see all of their faces, all of our podcast episodes are also available in video format on our YouTube channel.
So I'm Dr. Catherine Hutchinson. I'm a licensed psychologist and I'm a clinician at Peak City Psychology in Apex. And my specialty is working with women and moms, particularly sort of across the developmental trajectory of being a mom, from perinatal all the way through launching your kids to parenting adult and young adult children. So this is a topic I talk about pretty much every day, I would say.
Hey everyone, my name is Brittany Winslow. I am a pediatric occupational therapist and I am the owner and CEO of Emerge Pediatric Therapy. I have become really passionate also about this area in the last few years, being an ADHD mom of three myself. And so I feel like a lot of the area that I spend my time in now is understanding sensory processing, executive function, self-regulation, and all like the whole family system to understand how we can best support everyone and not just the kids. We have obviously the bread and butter of what we do in the clinic is working directly with kids, but that work gets so much richer whenever we factor in everyone in the whole family. So I've been spending a lot of my time in that in the last year or so. So excited for the conversation.
I am Anna Elizabeth. I'm what I call a healing specialist. So when we have conflict or trauma in our life, I use life and spiritual coaching, energy medicine, and intuitive guidance to help people create solutions by looking at their internal gifts that they have and the external resources that they have to achieve whatever that they want so that they and their families and their communities and their work can thrive no matter what's happening around them.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Lehman. I'm a nurse practitioner and a certified nurse midwife. And I am the founder of a practice, Mother Love Wellness. The goal of my practice is to help women through some of the biggest gaps I've identified in women's health, preconception care, early pregnancy, the first postpartum year, and perimenopause. These are all huge life transitions where women historically have not received the support they need. And I take a psychosocial approach. We look at labs and hormones and metabolic systems in addition to psychosocial issues to help women feel better faster. And I'm so excited to be on this panel and meet all these amazing referral partners. So this is just such an amazing holistic panel. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm Sarah Parise, founder of Great Days by Sarah, because I believe that everyone, especially moms, deserve to have more great days. And I'm known for helping moms, no matter how busy, no matter how overwhelmed, carve out just 2% of the day for their own wellness, not just the physical, coming from the personal training standpoint, but also the mental and emotional. So think fitness, food, and finding your best self at every age and stage of motherhood. And systems are my jam. So this is the only way that we get through the day. I'm really excited for this chat today.
Yes. And on that note, the note that systems are my jam, let's dive in. I'm really excited for this conversation. So the first place I want to take us is talking about why moms are so overwhelmed. I really want us to break down and understand the invisible mental load that moms carry. Before we can really talk about the solutions, we need to talk about what's actually causing the stress. I was actually just with a mom friend the other day over coffee, and we were talking, and she was sharing that her partner doesn't seem to understand why it's like she's moving through sludge and why she just can't get up and do the things that he expects she'll be having done during the day. And I think I'm seeing that more and more amongst my mom friends. Many moms are not just managing tasks, they are carrying the responsibility of remembering, anticipating, planning, coordinating, and often managing everyone else's needs as well as their own. And much of that work is invisible. It's something our partner can't see, our children can't see, our boss can't see, but it's something we're carrying inside. And that makes it difficult for others to see. It makes it difficult for us to share. Can you help us put language to the invisible labor that runs a household, as well as what happens to a mom's mental and emotional health when that load is consistently unbalanced?
This is Catherine. I'd be happy to talk about this. So I think of invisible labor as everything that happens that keeps a family and a household running that nobody sees, nobody thinks to schedule, and honestly, nobody often thinks to thank you for because they don't even know you're doing it, right? So if we think of a task like doing the laundry, that's executing a task. But alongside of that is recognizing like, okay, my daughter has a soccer game. She's going to need a clean jersey. So let me get it started now. And my son has a special event coming up and he's going to need this. And we're low on laundry detergent. So let me put that on the list. It's all of these other thoughts and memories that go into completing a task. And I always think of it, it's like every mom I know has so many different tabs open and running in her brain at any given time that really aren't visible to everyone else.
Catherine, it's like you were just in my head in my training that I did last month. I did a too many tabs training, and it was all about context switching. And I think that's 50% of like why moms in particular are so tired. Even if I talk to moms all the time, they're like, even if I sleep, I'm still exhausted. And I was like, I think two major factors come into play, and it's decision fatigue. Like the average person makes 30,000 decisions in a day, and moms by studies almost triple that every single day. That the amount of times that you're thinking about other things when you're not actually doing it, and then how many times you're actually switching tasks. So many of us are working. You're doing from working from home to kids to being a partner to being a community member. And how many times, if you really kind of time blocked every time you switch tasks, it's unbelievable how exhausting that is for our brain. And our brains aren't meant to function like that. And with all the excessive input that we have, how can we not be exhausted from this invisible load that, you're right, Chrissy, people aren't seeing? Like you can't tell by the outside. The laundry's the product, but think about just all the decisions you just listed, Catherine, of what has to go into the laundry.
Yeah, this is all great. And I wanted to add a couple of things that I often hear when I'm talking to moms in the clinic or just moms out in the community is there's often also this piece of whenever if you yourself are neurodivergent or you have kids that are neurodivergent, another part of that is like outside of all the tasks, there's also what are the things that's going to create a meltdown for my kid, or what does my kid need for this? So there's these other pieces that are really hard to put on a list and really hard to explain to people that I feel like moms are always holding in their brains as well. And then on top of the idea that self-regulation for ourselves is a limited resource that is finite and it's like a battery. So as we go throughout our day, that ability for ourselves to be regulated starts to dwindle. So I feel this myself as a parent who's getting the kids out the door in the morning, thinking of all the things. Today's my daughter's birthday. I'm trying to figure this out, right? So we're going through this and we're using so much of our self-regulation to do what we need to do for the day. And then we land back at home in the evening and like we're completely done and completed, but there's still things that we have to do. So our ability to even tackle those, I find a lot of parents, like myself included at times, get really hard on ourselves about how we're like, why can't we figure this out? But our battery's drained and there's nothing we can really do about that at that time of day other than rest and recharge.
And yes to all of those things there that all of you have mentioned. And Sarah, you mentioned 30,000 decisions a day. So there's also evidence that the average person has approximately 70,000 thoughts a day, and not decisions, but just thoughts. And the vast majority of them we're not even aware of. And if you're like my brain and many moms' brains, again, it's more than that 70,000. And so what we have to do is become aware of that. When we're not aware of all of those self-deprecating or defeating or limiting thoughts, it actually is draining our energy and our mental systems as well. And what many of you touched on is all of that sort of bandwidth is draining our energy body, literally. And that is an integral part of our system. And also, we're not only being depleted that way, but for those of us who are very energy sensitive, nurturing, compassionate, we are actually experiencing the level of people's energy around us. So if they're frantic or if they're drained, we're experiencing that. And without knowing it, often we are trying to regulate our own nervous system based on what's happening around us. And so that's where energy awareness can also come in to play to help us better maintain those reserves that we have.
These are all amazing points. And I think I would just like to add that when I work with families and women, I always just like to put things in context that, evolutionary biology has gifted the feminine brain with this ability to multitask and, be very sensitive, pick up on things. But that can also be something that makes us vulnerable because we also can't filter out all the stimuli. And, just thinking about modern life and how we're living, we're meant to live more in community with more support, which most people don't have. We're living lives as families that are rather isolated, and it just takes a lot more to get the tasks done as an individual rather than having multi-generational households or, neighbors that you can call on readily. So I think being a woman living more seasonally and on a cycle, trying to fit into this productivity and efficiency model of modern life, it can be very challenging. So just also trying to put that in context for women can be really helpful, that it's not a personal failure. This is somewhat societal, that we have to see it for what it is and also not, be as sensitive to that.
Kate, I couldn't agree with that more, and was going to add a similar sentiment that feeling exhausted and overwhelmed, like, let's be clear, that is not a personal failing whatsoever. It is absolutely a failure of systems, all the way from sort of social and cultural systems and expectations for women and moms, all the way down to, some of the systems that are present in our day-to-day life.
I just wanted to make a quick observation. And I think it was actually something you said, Dr. Catherine, in the beginning about there being no thank you. And everything we've talked about has kind of gotten to this mental load and everything that we're carrying. And I think there is something to be said, not that it will perfectly fix or heal anything, but sometimes even just to be seen, just to have that recognition and just to have someone in the household say, wow, I see you and I see how much you're carrying. That in and of itself can be very liberating. Not that it will fix everything, but just that someone saying thank you or acknowledge you or I see you can be a big factor too. And maybe that in and of itself should be a system in the home where we recognize what role each person is playing and what they're contributing. So that really struck me when you said that.
Thank you, Chrissy, for that. And I would say that what you're describing is actually the first step in creating a system by making the invisible visible. right? For someone to be able to thank you and appreciate you for something, they have to know and be aware that you're doing it. And I think that that is a really important step, for us as women and moms and families and communities and our society, is to start naming and acknowledging all of this invisible work that women are doing.
And it starts with us, right? We have to validate it to ourselves that what I'm doing is really important work. And then, vocalizing that to our families, to our partners, not being afraid to say, hey, this is what I did today, taking credit for it.
Mhm. I do actually have a follow-up question because my kids are a little older now, and I have noticed that over the years, some of the mental load has carried through, it has remained the same, but there has been times where it's shown up differently depending on the stage of life that we're in. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit more. How does the mental load show up differently during major life transitions, such as postpartum and the school years, the toddler years, or launching kids into adulthood, or even, teens? Can we talk just really briefly about that?
Yeah, I'd love to kick us off with this because I've experienced this too, Cindy. And it was something that, particularly as my oldest daughter entered into middle school, I felt just a different level of the mental load where I thought that we were supposed to be getting a little more independent. And so, having worked in that area more over the last year, I think a big element of that in some of these transitions, particularly as the kids get older, I think when our kids are younger, we generally know what they need. We know where they need to be. Like, we're managing the schedules. And as the kids get older, they have more they want to do. They have more opinions. They're creating plans that they're not accounting for how they're going to get there. Like, we just, as the moms, a lot of times are then trying to figure out what's the infrastructure to also carry out these other plans that these humans are making. So it just becomes so much more complex. And I think that the level of independence that our kids are expected to have, especially if they don't have the executive function to back that up, we're just stepping in more and more to support them at that level that they're expected to show up as. We want to make sure they're not forgetting their laptop for school or forgetting their soccer cleats and their soccer bag. There's just so much more that is happening. So that's been part of my experience as kids get older, how it becomes more complex. It's not just like the parent schedule anymore. It's the dynamic schedules of everyone and all that's required of that.
I would say one of the biggest transitions is obviously that postpartum transition, right? Where the amount of tasks and mental labor, it just explodes overnight. You have this other human that you have to be responsible for. And that is such a big transition because it's also a moment to really try to kick things off in a good way between two partners who are having a child, right? And to make sure that, mom just doesn't default into sort of being the one, who's managing all of that stuff. Because it happens in these little micro moments, where it kind of feels easier, like, well, I know what the baby needs better, or I can soothe them more quickly, or it's going to be too complicated to explain to you how to do it. So I'll just do it. And then before you know it, you sort of have this default of, mom being the one that's holding all of this and managing it, even if dad, and obviously we're talking about sort of heteronormative couples here, but in terms of dad, he might be executing some tasks, but he's not the one who is thinking about them, planning them, remembering them. He's more being sort of tasked with completing them.
I would love to piggyback off that comment that Catherine made, because my favorite time to start the conversation with mothers and parents is around that 34 to 36 weeks of gestation. I really encourage parents to kind of wrap up their birth prep by 36 weeks so that we can launch into the conversation about postpartum before they're in it, before they're in a crisis. Because I think really identifying early what your parenting styles, what you want them to be, what models you had from your childhood, what your value system and kind of family mission statement is, how you're going to approach parenting, the earlier you start having those conversations, the better. So I really love working with families early on that and not waiting until they're, 6 weeks postpartum. You can never prepare early enough for that.
And to that point, that was my hardest season of motherhood. I was 36 when I had my first. And for those of you that don't know my story, I went through all of it: postpartum depression, anxiety, rage, which I had never even heard of before, and really struggled to feel like, well, this is just normal and this is how moms feel. And I had a mother who was a martyr and did everything for everyone, still does, has never once taken time for herself or even acknowledged that she should take care of herself. So I just kind of fell into motherhood thinking that that's what was supposed to happen. And it was right, my 6 month mark was the darkest of dark and could have gone a very different direction. And thank God my husband noticed that I was not myself. And we sat down and he's like, why do you think you need to do all the things? At no point did I say, do I expect dinner ready when I get home? Or I expect the house to look anything like our house used to look when we were single. And it like never occurred to me that it could be different until that moment. And then, of course, pelvic floor therapy came in and mental health therapy came in, and I was able to dig my way out of the darkness. But I tell moms all the time, if you feel like something's off or you're just unhappy with it like the way it is, if you have a partner in play, say something. It might be all in your head and they might not even know. I mean, our partners can be great and they can be very intuitive and great partners. We chose them for a reason. But at the same time, they're not in our heads. And especially during these times of transition, especially these hormone fluctuations and how difficult things can get. If you feel like something's off, it is. And say something and start with your partner and then seek the help that you need, because that was the game changer for me. And that's the only reason I'm sitting here today, is because I got the help that I needed through that difficult chapter.
Thank you so much to all of you who gave information in that particular episode, because this is helping us to put language to the individual labor that is running households. And I'm sure that moms are going to appreciate feeling seen. We're going to move on now into delegation.